Okay, so what I really want to talk about right now is the last album which I listened to, which is Grace Jones's Nightclubbing from 1981, which I think it's so fucking cool. I'm very fascinated with Grace Jones as a figure, and as much as I want to talk about that album, I feel like I have to really lead into it by first talking about what got me interested or what got me to the point of wanting to listen to that Grace Jones album in the first place, and that is why I'm gonna talk about Iggy Pop's 1977 album, The Idiot. And this is Iggy Pop's first studio album as a solo artist, and it comes out in 1977. It is the name of the album is The Idiot is based on the Dostoevsky novel, and he recorded it in 1976 around May to August or somewhere around that period. And what makes this album important in historically, or not really historically, but just in the rock spectrum or whatever of things, is that it unofficially marks the start of David Bowie's Berlin period. So this whole album of Iggy Pop is actually produced by David Bowie in 1976, right before he begins production on his Berlin trilogy, which starts off with Low, and then there's Heroes and Lodger. But 1977, The Idiot comes out after Low, I think. So Low is made after it, but then it comes out before The Idiot. And now Iggy Pop, in this point of his career, he had some albums with the Stooges, starting from the, I'd like to say late 60s, maybe 69-ish. And he was at the forefront of what we retrospectively look at now as a kind of proto-punk, right? He was making punk music in the similar kind of vein of what you would consider as punk in terms of the aggression, the perspective onto it, the style and everything. But it wasn't really necessarily in the punk rock era or the period in 1976 and so forth. But he was making a lot of albums at the time, and with the Stooges. And the first album where he really involves himself with David Bowie was, I think, the album before this. I think 1973. I'm not sure, I could be wrong with the dates, but I think 1973 is Raw Power, which is an album by Iggy and the Stooges, and that is more, as I said earlier, more of a proto-punk kind of album. And it was fully produced by David Bowie, and it's very interesting, the history of that album, because there's like a David Bowie produced version, which is what came out at the time, and then in the middle 90s, Iggy Pop was asked to remix it, and he has his own remix version of what he claims was more of what the Stooges would have wanted, or what they envisioned for that album. But anyway, so David Bowie and Iggy had been friends at a time. 73, so that would have been like a year after Ziggy Stardust, I guess. They probably met in New York or something. Anyway, so 1977, he releases the album The Idiot, and when you hear what immediately strikes me when you hear the album is that it's not punk music, I'd like to say. I mean, maybe in vein, maybe in feel, maybe punk in the sense of the people behind it in what they're trying to express. But the music itself is more similar to the David Bowie stuff in the Berlin era. It's very art rock. And fascinatingly, it reminds me of Lou Reed's work, I think, most strongly. It's a great album. It's one of my favorite albums that I've listened to this year so far, and I am such a big fan of, because this is not the Iggy Pop that you're used to from hearing the Stooges. This is a kind of a more mellow, more intentional. If that makes any sense. If that makes any sense, it's like he's more controlled, I'd like to say. Probably has something to do with David Bowie, but 1970. So The Idiot. One of my favorite songs in the album is I think it opens up with such a great. So it has a song called Sister Midnight. Sister Midnight is such a great song. And I think Sister Midnight, and then right after Sister Midnight, and I'm not sure. I'm missing. I don't have the track list with me right now, but I'm a big fan of. So the second song I think is called Night Clubbing, right? Might be second or third song, and there's just something so seductive about the way it's produced and Iggy Pop's voice, and yeah, in some ways this album kind of reminds me of the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed's work with Transformer, but there's something so alluring and seductive about hearing it all come together in the song Night Clubbing, as well as again on the first song, which was what did I say, Sister Midnight, two of my favorite songs, and then it has and the third my other song I really love from the album is China Girl, which is actually which David Bowie later makes in 1980 something, 83 or whatever, for Let's Dance for that album, which is a fantastic song in itself, but I think I prefer the Iggy Pop version, which was the original one from this one. It's such a great album. Iggy Pop, The Idiot. Later on in the year, he releases another album called Lust for Life, which I have not listened to yet, but from what I understand, it is more in vein with the traditional Iggy Pop sound and the Stooges. It's more punk, I think. But anyway, Iggy Pop, The Idiot, with David Bowie. So the song Night Clubbing on the album. So when I listened to this album, it put me all sorts of directions. It brought me back to reconnect with David Bowie. That's why I listened to Outside again. I mean, and I listened to Earthling later on. I listened to more Bowie, especially his Berlin period, and then I wanted to connect with how I was trying to look at it schematically in terms of the timeline of making this music. So I kind of listened to Bowie again. I got into Grace Jones because Grace Jones covers the song Night Clubbing on her album called Night Clubbing 1981, a couple of years later. And it's such an alluring album as well, and it's more of a post-disco kind of thing. But anyway, so I highly recommend this. Iggy Pop, The Idiot, 1977, very similar to Velvet Underground, produced by David Bowie, start of the Berlin period. It's a great album, and I highly recommend checking it out. So yeah.